What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, where I am joined by Dr. Jeffrey Gross, who's going to give us a lowdown on how stem cells work. And the beauty of it is that he's going to talk to us in layman terms, so it's easy for us to understand because, hey, you know, a lot of us are just meatheads learning to nerd out on these things. And luckily, we have an expert on the show who can tell us exactly how these things work in a way that's a little bit more easy to understand. But first and foremost, Dr. Jeffrey Gross, how are you today, sir?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I hope we cover some cool topics and open minds in new ways to help people meet their goals.
100%, man. And I mean, the first thing I wanted to open up with, because we hear a lot about it in social media in a lot of different places, like especially for anybody that's always looking for recovery, whether it's bodybuilding or, you know, fighting and all that good stuff. We hear about stem cells, but we don't really know a whole lot about it from like a very granular kind of perspective. That's where you come in and kind of give us a lowdown. But first and foremost, the number one thing I want to know about is, what are stem cells?
So stem cells are the basic ingredient cells that created us in the first place when we were, a fertilized egg and then an embryo and then a fetus. Before we were born, those are the cells that make us, they create a human. And then after we're created, they are a reserve, like on deposit for use when we need to renew, to regenerate, or to heal something. During childhood, of course, they're part of growth. But after that, it's more of maintenance and repair. And so we call them stem cells because all of our cells stem from these cells. And mostly stem cells haven't been assigned a final job yet. Like they haven't become a bone cell or a brain cell or a liver cell, but they're waiting for their job assignment on an as needed basis.
Is super interesting because it's kind of like now that opens the possibilities to like I can play with this and do whatever it is that I want with this cell, right?
Yeah, actually, a lot of the cutting edge research is learning how to, like you said, guide them to what we need them for. Although, if they're in the right neighborhood, they'll be guided by our own biology. Like our tissues and cells know how to coax. It's like all the construction workers, like, hey, come over here and be a construction worker. We need you over here.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's super interesting. And I mean, another question that I had in regards to that too, that just kind of popped up in my head was in regards to nature versus nurture. Is there certain environments that will force the cell to go in a certain direction versus the fact that maybe it's just a baby growing naturally and you see the stem cells kind of go off? Kind of like you made that construction analogy, but when you're able to influence it in a certain way, what does that even look like? Like, how do you go about, setting it up or steering it?
Well, a fetus developing or a baby being created, one cell population goes to the next cell, and that's how you develop an arm, and eventually it stops growing at some point. Like that's
crazy.
Millions of years of evolution of biology and how through one cell's talking to the neighbor, etc., through cell messengers, which we'll probably get into later, happens. But as we need those cells and call for those cells, it has to do with the small cell messengers and the small proteins that are being released. It's like when you call 911, you don't know if you're calling the ambulance or the fire truck or a policeman until you say, hey, I need this. I'm having, my stove's on fire, send the fire truck. Anybody hurt? No. Okay. We don't need an ambulance. All right. So they send the fire, team over, so our cells release on a need basis. There's an alert system within us. And we're learning more and more about that. And by taking those little messengers, we can then enhance them or concentrate them and then call for more of something we want. Like if we want to build more muscles and we're struggling to do that, even though we're doing everything else right, then there might be a way to use certain muscle alert systems, proteins from our muscles that are released called myokines. And these myokines can call for muscle assigned or muscle building stem cells.
Wow. Bro, I mean, yeah, Sounds like a science.
Yeah.
It's the best way to describe
Somewhere
it.
in there, I think
Yeah.
there's some science. Yeah.
It's like some serious work that went into that. But the other question now that I got is, I mean, you got all this nailed, right? You figured this all out, but how did this journey into medicine really start for you? And how did it lead you into the longevity space and learning about stem cells?
So I was a regular old country neurosurgeon, just practicing the way I was trained, taking care of people mostly with neck and back injuries. By trade, I'm a spine neurosurgeon, and for over 20 years, I was doing that. And about 5.5 years ago, it just hit me on the head that what I've been doing for 20 years is the same thing my professors that taught me were doing for 20 years. And we really haven't changed much in 40, 50, 60 years. And we really haven't, at least in terms of spine.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my patients would come in and say, yeah, I'm doing the exercises, I'm taking the anti-inflammatories, I've tried some cortisone injections. They help for a minute, but they're really not enough for me. But I'm not ready for surgery. I'm like, great. Okay, we'll put surgery off. That's the last thing. And they would come and say, hey, doc, how about this? How about that? How about stem cells? And I've always said, well, it's being looked at. It's an area of research. It's very interesting to me. And eventually I said, instead of it just being interesting, I'm going to go learn. So I stopped going to all these stodgy, doctor meetings where they pat themselves on the back for doing the same thing for 50 years. And we started going to stem cell meetings, and it was exciting and different. And for the last 5.5 years, that's just exploded in my practice and blossomed. And now what we do is it's a new tool to add for people depending on their problems. And I don't just take care of spines now. I take care of lots of different things, because you can't not. I mean, there's just so much. So that's kind of my little journey.
That's interesting. And the other question I had too, now that as you mentioned, some people were going like the dodgy route or whatever. Because I remember looking into stem cells originally, and they said that it was illegal. And I remember hearing about how you had to go down to Panama. Mel Gibson was talking about this, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the Joe Rogan podcast actually, but I can't remember.
Yep,
But
they
were
was
talking about like going to Panama or going to different places around the world.
Yep.
Is it legal in every state now or not yet?
I'm not an attorney, so don't consider this legal advice anyway. But so there's nothing illegal about what a doctor and patient decide to do together. What is challenging is what are called claims, and the FDA decides based on when they're ready, based on their people and whatever
lobbying,
and whatever else is out there. So whatever those pressures are, they decide when we doctors can make certain claims about the following: something like a drug or device that it will cure or treat a disease or condition. Now I use those words because they're their words, not mine. Mm-hmm. So I'm not allowed. I would be non-compliant if I made a claim that stem cells cure diabetes. I can't make that claim. Now, is there science and research that supports something like that? Absolutely, there is. Is our biologics like stem cells, because they're cells, right? And things like cells, are those drugs? Not really. Are they devices? Not really. But the FDA has jurisdiction? Yes. Why? Because Congress says they have jurisdiction, so we have to abide by that. So I can't make claims. Is it illegal? Define illegal. I guess if I violate a statute by making an improper claim because they say I can't make that claim, then yes, I guess in that form it is. Can you have them here? And yes. Now, 20 years ago or longer, it was first popularized in other countries. Most of the pro athletes like Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning, and those who got stem cell treatments, left this country. Many others did too. They just weren't probably famous enough to get it out there, or they were too private. I had patients that left the country to get stem cells. And most of the early and long-standing research and the long follow-up studies come from other countries because they've been doing this longer. Europe and Asia particularly. Now, a lot of athletes and others, especially for Americans, go to Mexico and Central America because it's closer and it's a great place to take a vacation. So you might as well work in a little time off. And Mel Gibson, as you know, I think first took his father who was
Yeah.
having some issues, and then I think himself. And a lot of these places, and now they can advertise. They are not under the jurisdiction of the FDA, being from another country, as far as I know. Not an attorney still. So their websites are full of, we treat cancer, we treat heart attack, we treat this. I can't say that in the United States, then I would be non-compliant. So now, can I help people or try to help people with these things? Absolutely. I can tell you about individual results of people, what we call anecdotal results. It's not a study of thousands. It's a few people here and there that we did this for, or did that for. I can't tell one person that you'll get the results that all my other patients got. Why? Because the FDA says I can't do that. So I want to be compliant. Yeah. So back to your original question, is it illegal? I don't know, ask your attorney, but we do it.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense, because that's kind of where the clarity lies. And the thing is, it's kind of strange when it comes to the FDA, because it seems like sometimes it can sway in your favor or against it, and it almost depends on how the lobbying is done. And, I've read enough books on it to kind of and that's why I started this podcast as well, to a degree, was because I wanted to learn more about this subject itself. Because when people make that claim about healing, I think it was a bread company, it was very famous, I think it was 10 years ago now. They were talking organic healing, and the bread is going to heal the gut, this, that, and the other. And it turned out it had a lot of good qualities, but they made a claim. And if you make a claim in certain states, it was jail time, so they were like, all right, off to jail you go.
Yeah. So we don't want to make any false claims. And honestly, doctors, we don't anyway, right? We can't guarantee results anyway. So I don't know. The whole thing is, a lot of red tape and what have you. And I know that the heart is in the right place, right? Trying to prevent consumers from getting something that's not safe or whatever. But there's wonderful research and science and studies, and there's nothing we do that's completely cavalier. Everything we do is backed up by some good work. Yeah. Probably multiple areas of good work.
Well, to your point, if you see results that are functioning, and at the same time, that's kind of where I think evolution is involved, regardless of whatever the subject may be. Because I remember the first doctor who said, we should wash our hands when we're delivering babies. They threw them into the nut house, which kind of goes to show it's wait a minute. And that just, sometimes we got to make that paradigm shift, and it involves the mind and, us as a collective saying, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe we're not there yet, but I think in time we have to, it's inevitable. But that also brings me to another question that I had was, how does regenerative treatment contrast with conventional medical approaches? Now that we're talking about, it's not cavalier, but it is different. How is it different, and in what ways?
Well, it's biological, right? These are cells and proteins and signaling particles that a cell gives off to other cells that stimulate certain activities in a cell. So as opposed to a chemical, like a drug, although some drugs are actually biologics. For example, semaglutide or Ozempic is a biologic peptide. So that's the first thing. It's not just something completely concocted in a lab, right? It's naturally grown. It comes from usually donated from after birth, C-section. Mothers deliver their babies by C-sections, and they have this stuff we used to throw away. Placenta, amniotic fluid, umbilical cord. It was trash, and now it's treasure. So it's biological. That's the first thing. So secondly, it has sort of natural effects, right? It has cellular metabolic effects. It calls for anti-inflammatory pathways, regenerative, restorative pathways in the body, as opposed to the alternative pathway, which is sort of defense mode, the immune system, inflammation. You think about it, the analogy here, and I know you've had people on before who've talked about sort of weight loss, right? And you want to lean mass, right? You want to get rid of the fat. And cells in our body tend to have two modes, pardon me, of metabolism. They're either burning or they're storing. There's very little in between. It's the dial's over here and then flip, it's over here and then flip. It's like there's not a lot in between. It's kind of the same thing with cell metabolism. It's either pro-inflammatory, which is a defense mode, or it's anti-inflammatory, which is perfect operational state.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the biggest difference. And I guess when you have that modality in your favor, you know, a lot of things you can do, and you don't necessarily have to use the synthetic side of things. Because I think, I mean, from my limited perspective, but sometimes when we do things that are kind of exogenous, like exogenous testosterone and things of that nature, it almost seems like the body can reject it more. Whereas from a biological side of things, it's probably easier for the body to take it in and be like, all right, cool, I know how to work with this.
Right. Because the body, that's why they call it bioidentical. The body doesn't know where that testosterone came from. It either made it itself or it didn't. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where you see all these weird, funky things happen. Like bodybuilders, honestly, like when it comes to the enhanced side of things, when it comes to the enhanced bodybuilders, they're willing to try everything and anything, right? So it's kind of like, okay, stem cells, mix that with some insulin. You know, we should just make them guinea pigs for all this stuff, right? They're willing to do it. But
Right.
on a separate note, I do want to hear a story where stem cell treatments made a massive difference in chronic conditions, because that's the one thing that I keep hearing about, keep learning about, and keep seeing that chronic issues are one of the biggest things that are killing people in the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah, if you could just share some of
yeah,
the
I'm going to
stories.
jump in there, but first and foremost, when we offer, well, I'll call these stem cells in general regenerative medicine approaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we offer these things, we want to give them to someone who's optimized. So we don't want to. If we took someone who's out of shape and smoking and overweight, and we said, "Okay, come on in. We're gonna give you these these stem cell messengers or something," it's not going to be a good use of that
Gotcha.
because you're putting it into an environment that's not optimized. So we start out with making sure people are doing everything they can to stimulate their own stem cell activity. Whether it's optimizing their exercise or their diet, not just what they eat but when they eat, including protein and macros, and even the type of amino acids, supplements. Our diet is not, even if we eat clean and good, it's still not perfect, and we do need supplements to help us get stuff that we're designed to have or need to have that we just don't get. Now, of course, 300 years ago, living off the land, we probably got a lot more of that. But so many things are leached out of our fruits and vegetables and grains and meats and whatever else is in the water, or whatever these crazy seed oils we're having and all that. So we want to make sure we have someone that's sleeping and de-stressed and breathes right. I mean, top to bottom. And then we're going to get the most out of something regenerative. So when we have someone with I'll call it hyperinflammation, whether it's an immune problem, an autoimmune problem, like a thyroid that's attacking itself, or a inflammatory bowel problem, or Crohn's disease, things where there's too much inflammation in the body, that's when we get the biggest benefits. The other area would be people who have infections that are known to be significantly pro-inflammatory. All infections have some inflammation, but let's take COVID as a wonderful example. It's known to be on the higher of the scale of inflammatory responses. And that's why all those patients had so many problems with heart and lungs, and now after effects that we call long COVID, right? And then the other infection that's known to have significant inflammation, as an example, is Lyme's disease, which is bacterial infection. Anyway, with those people, they tend to have lots of joint pain. They can have skin dryness and what's called psoriasis. They can have all kinds of things. And you see advertisements on television all the time for these anti-inflammatories, right? All these people with stress and psoriasis. Listen, this is a biological issue. It's best addressed, or at least helped by these things. So the best results come from people who have this throughout their body, and we can help them fight their own inflammation, and then they have improvement, generally speaking, with reduced pain in the joints because we take away the inflammation in the joints. They have less circulating antibodies and immune response. They feel better. They have more energy because they're not bogged down. Their system isn't gunked up. Their lymph system isn't gunked up with all of this. So they sleep better. They recover from workouts better. They across the board. This is what we see.
Interesting. I mean, the one thing that I used to see that used to exist and wasn't taken into consideration for whatever reason in allopathic medicine was just diet and like lifestyle. like for some reason we kept separating that, or we kept looking at it as something that was completely foreign, or something that was over there and wasn't going to affect the body. But now it's so refreshing because every single doctor I've had on the show is like, well, let's look at diet and lifestyle first, and honestly I'm like, whoa, hallelujah, that didn't exist before. Like even hydration wasn't something that people would bring up, and I'm like, why are we not talking about these things? It's like from my very simplistic, point of view, it's just kind of like, okay, we're dehydrated, we're suffering chronic diseases, we're overeating, we're overly toxic with like a lot of the foods that we eat. I mean, again, and going back to the micronutrient side of things, that's kind of where like I got into supplements, and not necessarily where it's like, okay, I just need to take more supplements because somebody told me fish oils are good. It's almost like, okay, there's a reason why. It's kind of like, okay, magnesium, I'm not going to get it in my food. I got to eat like tubs and tubs of spinach and all kinds of different things for like the folates and blah, 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 right? And to your point, it's kind of like, you're right, it's you got to build on it. So it seems as though stem cells is kind of like that final piece after you get this figured out.
Yeah, it could be part of you do some does it for a specific reason, or it's we have people that I call I don't call them, but I refer to them because someone else named this the biohackers, right? They do it to prevent. They do it to prevent, to slow the cellular aging process. And I'm one of them now. Like I'm doing it myself, and I just do it routinely. So it could be part of a one-time thing. It could be part of a routine thing. I'll tell you this. My low-hanging fruit, though, where we really help people that I think the most is when they have a particular joint injury. Knees are very common. I've treated almost all the joints of the body and the spine, which is really why I went into this field, this newer part of my practice, is because I was a spine guy looking to add a tool. But now I'm treating more knees and things than I've ever done. But we really get some crazy good results. I just posted on our Instagram a couple days ago an example of someone we were able to help restore some of the cartilage in the knee. So we're trying to help people avoid surgery. I'm going to put myself and other surgeons out of business, hopefully.
Well, no, that's awesome, because I mean, if the body can heal itself, that's very, very, man, like that's pretty mind-blowing technology. And the fact that we have it and we're just kind of, it seems like this is the genesis, right? It's like we haven't even gotten to like chapter 2 yet, which is why it's like, this is massive, man. Like I'm hoping when I get old, it's all mastered, so I can be like, all right, my knees are shot, perfect. All my years of squatting, I can come back and get my cartilage back,
Yep. Of course, the earlier you get to it, in more of a preventative, the easier it is to maintain it. So we're finding that too. But you're absolutely right. We have this, our bodies have this ability to heal. We're just tapping back into it or enhancing it, especially as we get older. Our stem cells don't function as well as they used to, just like our own cells don't function as well as they used to. Why? They're exposed to chronic inflammation, to the environment, to electromagnetic waves, to with the 5.0 on our cell phones, 5G, all that stuff out there, or whatever, pesticides, Monsanto, and what they inject the chickens with, and the seed oils. I mean, all this stuff is causing us to be inflamed, and accumulation of inflammation, it deals with the speed of aging and the speed of degeneration and all that.
Now that we're on the topic of inflammation, though, I did want to ask you from your perspective and how you go about it, because I'm sure you have a protocol, but what's one of the first things that you want to take out? Is it usually the seed oils, or is it just fast food? What does it generally look like for you?
Listen, when I meet with people, I try to do a whole inventory the first time. We go over their entire lifestyle, and I try to give them starter pieces. If I give you 1,000 things at once, it's going to get lost. People, it's too much, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I give you a little starter block. So we'll say, okay, let's try to reduce this. Let's add 5 anti-inflammatory supplements if you're not taking any. I take a multivitamin. Yeah, that's great, but that just prevents malnutrition. We need optimal nutrition. So I try to give little baby steps and build on it. And some people come to me, they're already taking 20 things. And then I look to tweak it. Okay, what haven't you tried? What do you want to do? What can we measure? We like to measure results too. So we do inflammatory tests in the bloodstream, which are not part of a routine test you're going to get from a regular physical. We do inflammatory markers. We do biological age tests. which look at how old your cells appear compared to your actual age on a calendar, right? Because you could
Yeah.
be, you've seen this right now. You're younger, so people your age tend to look young anyway. But when you start to get my age, pushing 60, you could look at two guys standing next to each other, and one looks kind of like, hey, you look kind of 50, and the other guy looks kind of 70,
Yeah.
right? Because the older we get, like the more, because the 70-year-old, maybe he smoked a lot, drank a lot, didn't exercise, ate a lot of bad food, didn't, and he just had hard living, and lifestyle, like you said, lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So you starts to see a difference at some point. So you got it. The earlier you make the changes and the more of these changes you pay attention to, the better. That doesn't mean you can't, you know, have a cocktail on New Year's Eve or do some fun things and enjoy life. But if you do it in little celebratory bits, it's gonna be way better than making a lifestyle of having a six-pack every night.
No, I mean, it's one of those things that I cut out probably, man, I can't even remember how many years ago it's been. Like, the last time I drank, I think, was when I was in Costa Rica visiting, and it was like, yeah, you know what, let's have some drinks. And I got drunk, but that was a good 7 years ago now. And since then, I think I've had like maybe 2 beers, right? And I don't really crave it, but it's almost, it's one of those things where you can actually feel how detrimental it is, because when you start off drinking in your 20s, you can recover, you're good to go, you don't even get like hungover, right? You just jump right back up. Then I had a buddy of mine who we're already in our mid 20s, didn't stop drinking, and he told me, he's like, Conrad, man, literally, dog, I feel like I'm getting stupider. And I'm like, what do you mean, man? He's like, legit, I feel dumb. I'm like, maybe you should quit drinking, bro. And sure enough, he quit drinking. It almost felt like he looked like a new guy. Lost about 10 pounds, the puffiness and like his face kind of left. And it's one of these things that, to your point, if you get rid of it, you can see some major and drastic changes in your life. And usually it's one thing that leads to another, and then you kind of start from there, and that's where the habit development comes in, right?
Totally agree with you. It's just amazing how much impact our lifestyle choices really have on our health, especially in our later years.
Yeah. And the other question I had, as far as athletes now, do you see a massive influx of athletes just coming in for like wrists? I could imagine wrist, elbows, like a lot of the joints.
I have pockets of athletes. Most of my basketball players, it's their knees. Most of my hip hop or break dancers, it's their shoulders, because the way they load on their shoulders, because they're popping up and down on their hands, doing crazy moves.
Mm-hmm.
That's an Olympic sport this year, by the way. So check it out. Yeah,
breakdancing.
Or 2024. I say this year, but coming up here.
Coming up. Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah. And then I see a smattering of a lot of hip stuff. My older patients tend to be, they're not athletes per se necessarily, but hips. I do see some feet problems. Usually it's the runners with feet and ankle.
Mm-hmm.
So I see these patterns, and really doctoring is about identifying patterns and knowing what to do about it, So those are the patterns that are pulling out of this. But knees are probably number one, just by volume, plus everyone has two knees. So you get a lot of knees, but they just, the stress they take, the kind of sports that we do, like tennis players do a lot of cutting and twisting, and golfers, it's hips or knees, so occasional shoulder, but shoulders don't bear weight unless you're a hip hop dancer. So I think our best results are knees, but we have more knees than anywhere.
Interesting. And the thing that I was thinking about, because I got a brother, and unfortunately, when he was 19, he got into a really bad motorcycle accident, and now he's a quadriplegic. So he's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, right? And that's kind of where I'm like, I try to always maintain, positive mindset and all that. What does this mean maybe for a paraplegic, I don't know, like 10 years, 20 years down the road? Do you see the technology maybe catching up to a place where the spine can heal, or?
I do. In fact, there's some recent work out of China. And again, a lot of the cutting edge stuff comes from China and Europe. And some of these cells, they're able to encourage to work backwards up the cell lineage to even a more powerful type of stem cell, not just one that hasn't been assigned a final job, but one can almost go back towards being an embryo type cell where it can really just develop and regrow part of the body. I mean, you think about it, there are species that can regrow a tail or a limb, right? Certain salamanders can regrow a limb, and then lizards can regrow a tail. A starfish can regrow an arm, and even human children up to the age of 5 or 6, if they cut the tip of their finger that's further out than the last joint, they can regrow that.
Wow.
After about age 6, those genes turn off; they're preserved. So the point is, once we get more control of those genes, and we follow some of the research in what's going on in China, they have shown where they've gone into people that are paraplegics or quadriplegics that have spinal cord damage. They actually remove the scar tissue and put in these, I'll call them enhanced stem cells of sorts. And they have seen some return of nerve growth. Highly experimental, but do I see it coming? Absolutely. This is kind of one of the holy grails of stem cells. It's one of the reasons stem cell research got funded in the first place, because of Christopher Reeves when he became a quadriplegic, right? The Reeves Foundation, was behind a lot of that funding.
Wow. I mean, that's super interesting, and that means there's hope. So,
yeah,
like I said before, I feel like this is just starting off, and there's a lot to, there's a lot on the table. There's a lot of evolution that needs to happen for us to really get to that next level. And I mean, I'm very optimistic about what the future holds. And honestly, because that's one of the things that I see that is probably the most life-changing for anybody that's in a wheelchair, is just, being able to walk again, if they were able to walk, or if you were born with any spinal deformities or anything, right?
Yeah. No, I think that we're learning so much from stem cells, and we're learning what we can do to help people heal themselves, basically, because that's really what's happening. Is I'm not doing the work. I'm just helping someone heal themselves, or help heal themselves. So the more we learn, the more we can do, right? And we're seeing this. There are new cancer techniques, both for bloodborne cancers and solid tumors, involving jazzing up the immune system using stem cell technology. One is where you jazz up some of the cells to recognize the tumor, like a hyperimmune removal. And then there are other types of cells in our body called natural killer cells that are constantly circulating through our bodies, removing little accidental cancer cells. We get those all the time. That doesn't mean we have cancer. It's just we have a surveillance system to remove it,
Yeah.
So we can, there are ways to use the messengers from these NK or natural killer cells that could be used as a cancer treatment for solid tumors. So there's some exciting stuff, and I'm looking into this, for my own benefits and patients near me that we could offer this to. But it's hard to come up by some of these things because they are special. They're not just a regular off-the-shelf stem cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like how would you go about acquiring that? Would it have to be from the placenta again, or how do you go about even getting it?
Well, they could be encouraged. Natural killer cells can be taken from your own bloodstream, and they can be encouraged by stem cells to behave in a better way or more active way. Things like that. There are some different ways. These, as I alluded to earlier, these cell messengers are part of regenerative medicine, where one cell gives off information to another cell, and actually not just another cell, but thousands of cells in the neighborhood saying, hey guys, we're going to war. Join me. You're either with me or you're not.
Yeah, man.
So, they're all with. So cells can be encouraged by their neighbors and so forth and so on. And those are through cell-to-cell signaling particles. And those particles are a little bit of a membrane with some growth factors and little small peptides and proteins, small microRNAs. And it delivers messages into those cells. And those are called extracellular vesicles, or exosomes. Some people call them nanoparticles. And they're about 1/1000th the size of a cell. And we can get those from amniotic fluid, umbilical cord, placenta, highly concentrated. And the beauty of those is they're so small that they will cross in the blood-brain barrier if you get them intravenous, right? So it's really good for getting to the brain and the spinal cord and things like that.
So when it comes to somebody that, let's say, when it comes to mental illness and stuff, right? Because that's kind of one of these frontiers where, I mean, we're discovering all this stuff as we go. Obviously, I'm not an expert, right? But when it comes to like, if I'm a neurologist and I could, maybe consult somebody like yourself and be like, okay, how do I get the exosomes involved here so we can, promote healing? If somebody has like I don't know, like brain damage from blunt force, or people that you've seen that have suffered some other types of traumatic injuries to the brain, or something's wrong with the brain, or even development for a lot of the kids that we're seeing,
Yep. Yeah.
autism or whatever the case may be, would this be helpful in that regard?
To the extent that there is an inflammatory component, yes. So early after traumatic brain injury, early after stroke, Alzheimer's disease has an inflammatory component. All of these things, if we can suppress the inflammation, then there'll be less scar tissue formation and more return to natural functioning, things like that. But we are learning more and more about how to help some of the other problems, or after the inflammation's kind of settled down, like after an injury.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where some of these more advanced sort of enhanced stem cells will come in. They're just not available here yet.
Oh man, like it seems like, oh god, it just seems like there's got to be so much more research involved and just kind of bigger promotion of it, which is why I'm excited, but at the same time, like, let's hurry it up, man. Like, let's get it going because
nothing's fast here because, listen, there are a lot of political and economic pressures on disease and medicine, right?
mm-hmm.
The sick care system, and the life cycle and return on investment in the drug development, and
Yeah.
so but the big pharmas are now investing in this bio stem cell tech, so it's coming. They'll have their hands in it, of course, but it's coming.
Interesting. So, big pharma right now, how do they look at it then? They just kind of view it as something woo woo on the side, and they don't.
No, they know it's coming, but they're going to slow play it until they can really monetize it better.
I gotcha. Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's a good thing because it's going to lead to, obviously, it's going to lead to evolution, but at the same time, if they do control it now, they are the gatekeepers, right? So, it's almost like, how do we go about sliding around them and getting the FDA to be on our side? I don't know, but it's interesting because it seems like, man, it kind of sucks in a way, but at the same time, you got to take it with a grain of salt and just say, hey, you know what, we'll keep moving forward. But that's kind of where I commend your efforts, and you're moving it forward. You're doing the damn thing, so that's really, really good to hear. However,
you may find me buried in the desert, after all these because they don't like me getting some of these words out, but it's coming, and there are great things you can do, and they're here in the US. You don't have to leave the country necessarily. Some of the higher end enhanced stuff you would, but
mm-hmm.
Regular stem cells and stem cell messengers, they're here. I mean, they're natural, they're available.
That's interesting. And the other thing, obviously, because this topic, we always talk about men's health and erectile difficulties and sexual performance and all that good stuff that we like to talk about. When it comes to guys with ED or any issues in regards to their penises, would this actually be helpful as well? Like, would you inject some stem cells and kind of help out there?
Yeah, we have. So I'm going to skip ahead to skip ahead of testosterone optimization, all these things. I'm going to assume that you've covered that many times.
Yeah.
So in someone who is having difficulties and they're using all the different devices and pumps and shockwave type devices, and testosterone is there and everything is good and their PSA is normal, there could be a role for what we call the P shot.
Gotcha.
You've talked about the P shot before. P is obviously for penis.
Mm-hmm.
We have a version for the woman. It's called the O shot. I don't know why it's called the O shot, but I'll let you think about it. So the P shot is fairly simple to do, and it does seem to have fairly good results with our clients that want increased sensation, increased blood flow, increased firmness.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think they get more, because more blood flow, more firmness, they get a little more size.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any measurement studies to know that. But more satisfaction and more erection when they need it. So the shot's pretty easy. We put some numbing cream on the penis, wait about 20-25 minutes. We put a little rubber band tourniquet at the base of the penis so we can fill it up, and then we do 2 injections, one at the base of the shaft and one at the right at the corona where the gland starts. And we can deliver stem cells or stem cell messaging particles, the exosomes. I know there are doctors that do PRP as well, and PRP is kind of the very basic form of regenerative medicine, using your own concentrated growth factors from your bloodstream and the platelet cells. But when you change the oil in your car, you don't put the old oil back in there. So I like the young stuff, right? Put the young stuff in there. That's the most active stuff. It's never been exposed to inflammation. So that's what we do. It's called the P shot. And if you just need a little pick me up, it can last months or years. Some people do it, twice a year. Just depends on what you need.
Interesting. Yeah, because and to your point, I did not know that one fact where it's like, okay, you're right. Why would I use my old oil? I did not think about that because I've heard other people bring it up and other urologists and people that I've talked to. And now that you put it from that perspective, you're right. Why would you get the old stuff? Like that to me sounds kind of counterintuitive.
I don't want to say it's wrong. PRP does have a role and does help things. It's used in a lot of orthopedic issues and tendonitis and things like that, and cosmetic. But what we have with stem cells and exosomes is so much more powerful. And usually only, like when we do a tendonitis, you only need usually one approach with one injection with the stem cells or exosomes. With PRP, usually you have to go in a few times.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, it's kind of not a one and done. It's kind of more like, okay, cool. Step one is done. You'll probably be coming back.
But all these are improvements generally on these repeat cortisone injections. So cortisone has a role. It's very effective in reducing pain with acute inflammation. But when we repeat them, we're actually damaging the tissue.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like scar tissue buildup, right?
Yeah, because chronic inflammation is really forming chronic scar, or what we call granuloma, which is this kind of scar process.
Interesting. And the last thing that I wanted to ask you before, we close up, and we're going to talk about recelebrate.com. Don't worry. We got to definitely talk about that. But I wanted to just take us down the journey of your favorite story in regards to healing with one of your clients.
Well, I have a patient who had knee pain on both knees for 20 years after skiing injuries in the teens, and she wasn't very active, and she had trouble walking in high heels, although she liked to wear them. Trouble going up and down the stairs. Turned out that she had something called chondromalacia patellae, which means that the cartilage behind the kneecap was worn down. Ooh. So, the knee is a complex structure. It has the meniscus and cartilage above and below the meniscus, but it also has this kneecap that glides and has an important structural role. And her pain going up and down the stairs was really from this kneecap problem. So we injected her kneecaps, and she had an initial improvement in pain, particularly going up and down the stairs, from the anti-inflammatory benefits, but that never went away. She continued to feel better, and we repeated the MRI just to see, because people love to see what it looks like later. We repeated, I think, 15 months later, and we showed return of the cartilage in her knees, and that we did that back in 2021. So that's now 2.5 years, the summer of 21. So she's doing great, and we're watching her knees. And then we'll hopefully give this in a minute, but on my Recelebrate Instagram, I think Sunday, so a couple days ago, today's Tuesday, 2 days ago, we posted another knee case, but in this case, we had return of cartilage along the top of the tibia, which is the weight-bearing bone on the bottom, below the knee. So, and we measured it. We had it 8 months apart from also another ski injury.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are my favorites, when we can actually see those types of results.
That's fascinating, because it just, like I said, it gives me a lot of hope for the future, and it's good to see that. Obviously, we can't make claims here, but it really gives us hope for the future when you view it from the perspective of you're seeing tangible changes. You're seeing it in your face. It's not like, I'm just speculating here and I'm
Right.
optimistic, but it's like, no, I'm like seeing it in
Oh,
real time.
no, you're totally right. Having I mean, that's the science piece, being able to measure a change, right? And then you do enough people, and then you have a study, right? Okay, we've done 100 of these. Now we can look back and give the average result or something. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's how it's done. That's how any good discovery in medicine has started.
100%, man. But next up, you got to tell us about recelebrate.com. All right, because we definitely want to jump in there. And honestly, if any of you guys listening want to, take part in this, you got to make sure you check out recelebrate.com. But give us a lowdown.
Thank you. Yeah, we came up with this name for the practice, and because we wanted to celebrate the idea of stem cells. And since we're taking cells and rejuvenating them, we put re in front of it and the word cell. So Recelebrate is the brand, and it's RECELLEBRATE. And that's our website. Just put that in.com or Instagram or TikTok
Mm-hmm.
or YouTube, and you'll just type it in, you'll get there.
100%, yeah. And again, all the links are always in the description. But if somebody does want to get started and wants to reach out to you, is there like an intake form or anything they have to do?
Yeah, there's a website. It says contact us. If you just want to have a conversation to see what your problems are, what you want to try to address, or if you don't have problems, you just want to stay ahead of things or avoid. You had knee surgery a few years ago, and you definitely don't want to have a replacement down the line because you were told you'll be bone on bone or arthritis. Yeah, reach out to us. It's doesn't cost anything to have a conversation. Fill out the little consult form, and we'll get back to you. We'll find time to have a chat. You can get on Zoom like this and
Mm-hmm.
get to know you a little bit. It's kind of a concierge like thing. We just do that and get to know people and just want to get the word out. I want to educate that this is a thing. It is here. A lot of doctors aren't trained in this. I wasn't.
Yeah.
And if you ask your regular doctor or knee doctor, hey, what about stem cells? They're going to say what I used to say. I don't know. It's experimental. So
Yeah.
yeah, everything's experimental. If you want to experiment and try it, let us know.
100%. And again, this was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Dr. Gross, man, this was awesome because it really did open my eyes. And at the surface level, we always think we know things, and then we dive into these conversations. And this is why I value you coming on the show and explaining it to us. Because, I take so much out of this. Where I usually listen to this again, I'll have like my notebook and be like, taking notes here and there. But no, honestly, this was an absolute blast, and I would love to have you on again and talk some more. And you know,
Anytime. I'm phone a friend for you and your audience. Anytime you guys have a question, just reach out, and I'm happy to talk. I'm passionate about this. I love this stuff now. It's like I got a new energy in practicing medicine because we have this new stuff. I'm not just doing the same old thing.
yeah, no, and I can tell, man. And again, everything that in regards to Dr. Gross, I'm gonna make sure I put it into the description, guys, as you guys already know. And again, make sure you guys follow. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, take care. And that, my friends, is the end of today's episode. We'll see you in the next one.